Hello there. The last topic from Brazil's book that we are going to cover is orientation. Let's start by watching these two scenes where speakers talk about meeting other people.
We're both from Montreal, and how we met, we actually met in university, and it was kind of, because I'm kind of a clumsy guy, so
Very clumsy.
I walked into class and I slipped and I fell. It sounds kind of cheesy, and she helped me up, and then we started talking, and I didn't know anyone in the class because it was my first year of uni. Then we became friends, and then from there,
everything
started growing.
I've got the perfect girl for you.
Janice, I apologize to you if I don't seem real eager to jump into a forced, awkward, intimate situation that people like to call dating. I don't like the feeling. You're sitting there, you're wondering, do I have food on my face? Am I eating? Am I talking too much? Are they talking enough? Am I interested? I'm not really interested. Should I play like I'm interested, but I'm not that interested? But I think she might be interested, but do I want to be interested? But now she's not interested. So now all of a sudden I'm starting to get interested. And when am I supposed to kiss her? Do I have to wait for the door? Because then it's awkward. It's like, well, good night. Do you do like the ass out hug? Where you hug each other like this and the ass sticks out because you're trying not to get too close? You just go right in and kiss them on the lips. Or don't kiss them at all. It's very difficult trying to read the situation. And all the while, you're just really wondering, are we going to get hopped up enough to make some bad decisions? And perhaps play a little game called Just a Tip. Just for a second, just to see how it feels. Or, ouch, ouch, you're on my hair.
Okay.
Okay, can you put that so he can't see it? And thank you. Hey, Janice, great talk.
The first video where couples talk about how they met is an example of interactive talk. These are the kinds of interactions we have analyzed so far, where you can see that the speakers make choices in the intonation system, such as prominence, depending on what is given or not given information, or negotiated or unnegotiated information, for example, and they take into account the state of understanding between themselves and their interlocutors, and the choices they make have implications for the context of interaction projected. Brazil calls this direct orientation. And the second video is clearly different. We can see that the speaker is not evaluating the state of convergence between himself and his secretary before producing his utterances. He's not taking into account what has been said before in order to make his choices, what is negotiated or not. We can also notice that the choices of the intonation system are not as varied as in the previous case, as in direct orientation. In this case, Brazil talks about oblique orientation, and he says that speakers present their utterances as specimens of language. That is, they present the message as an uninterpreted entity. In order to exemplify the difference between oblique orientation and direct orientation, Brazil talks about different ways of reading. Let's see two videos that show these two different ways of approaching a text.
Now we see that nice can mean foolish or silly when describing a person, wanton and lascivious when modifying a behavior, or elegant when describing a type of dress.
Open the door to, see door. Open a person's eyes, see eye. Open fire, start shooting. The police, as in the police open fire on the gunman.
So Brazil says that while reading, the speaker may approach the task in either two ways, reading aloud or reading out. The first video shows a woman who is trying to explain the definitions that she's reading. So she makes contextual projections while reading the different definitions. This would be an example of reading aloud corresponding to direct orientation. In the second case, this woman is taking part in a in a dictionary challenge where people need to read the entry of a single word as quickly as possible. So this shows the second possibility in which some strategies of language are presented in a way that their projections are neutral with respect to the context of interaction that the intonation realizes. She's reading out, so she reads what is written on the paper without taking responsibility for what is printed. This corresponds to oblique orientation. Let's see two more examples of reading, but this time I want you to pay attention to the second speaker, to the man, and see if you can tell me which terms are used.
Elijah had just turned 13 months old when he uttered his first words. Love data. What do you say, little Elijah? Carl pressed the phone against his ear hard, disbelieving what he had just heard. Love data, Elijah giggled. Carl wept like he had never had before in his life, not caring whether the inmates or correctional officers around him saw. Here was his baby son, separated by a glass since birth, but still having love for his father. I love you too, Elijah.
It all started with a phone call. My mother was crying and begging, asking for more time, as if she were gasping for her last breath of air. She held me as tight as she could and cried. Her tears hit my shirt like bullets and told me we were being evicted. She kept apologizing to me. I thought I have no home. I should have asked for something less expensive at Christmas. On the morning of the eviction, a hard knock on the door woke me up. The sheriff was there to do his job.
The first girl is taking part in a writing competition that is held every year in Berkeley University. We can see that she is using direct orientation. She assumes a particular context of interaction and makes turn choices accordingly. So this could be another example of reading aloud, where a direct listener-sensitive stance is adopted. She's interpreting the text she's reading. In this case, she is the originator of the message. But sometimes you can read stories not written by yourself in this way, especially when you read to children. This is what we do, right? In the second case, and this is where I asked you to try to see which terms were used, the boy is quite nervous because he's sharing a personal experience. This would be an example of reading out. He reads out simply as if he had been invited to say what was printed in the paper. He actually wrote what he's reading, but he reads in that way. This is an example of oblique reading, of oblique orientation. The speaker does not assume that the linguistic sample he reads out has any kind of communicative significance in anyone's words. We can see that because of his choices. So the text is taken as an uninterpreted entity, and he doesn't seem to be taking responsibility for the truth of any assertion that he might be making while reading. The level term is the term that marks its unit as part of oblique orientation. Actually, if we focus on the terms used in oblique orientation, only falling and level terms are used in a different way, different from the P term used in direct orientation. The P term plays a role in two different systems, as we have said. It occurs in tonic segments which contain information that is presented as world-changing for the hearer. This is what we knew before this class. And in the case of oblique orientation, it reports this linguistic item, this text is what is written here. So it is used, as you can see, in two very different situations. So Brazil suggests there are two reasons why speakers produce oblique utterances. Basically, formulaic or ritualistic language or situations, and when they are having difficulties in utterance planning. Let's see some examples.
Ready, set, go!
So coming back to oblique orientation, we said only two terms were used, and those are falling terms and level terms. How would you choose one or the other? When is the level term used and when is the epitome used in oblique orientation? Well, level terms occur when the tone unit boundaries do not fall at point of potential completion. On your marks, get set, go. And falling terms are used when they do. That is, when there is a potential completion. So in the case of oblique orientation, the question would be, is it part of direct discourse? If it is part of direct discourse, you have all the variety of terms we've talked before, R terms and P terms, and then plus terms as well. If it is not part of direct discourse, the question is it a potential end? If it is, a P tone is used. If it's not a potential end, a level tone is used. Let's see other cases in which oblique orientation is used. We mentioned the parade ground command, which is a pre-coded activity. Language formula accompanies this repeated business, which is always said in the same way, and this absolves the speaker from any responsibility for what he's saying. Brazil says that messages delivered this way have the implication of something such as, these are not my words addressed particularly to you on this occasion. They are rather a routine performance whose appropriateness to our present situation we both recognize. And as we said before, the speaker assumes a special voice quality for this event, right? The example of the cartoon was included because it was clearer, but it exemplifies the same situation, right? In which the idea projected here is that this is not a newly created locution shaped by the speaker for this unique moment of utterance in mind. It's a predetermined script. Actually, the same phrase is repeated every time a running race starts, right? Let's see another example, and please this time pay attention to the allocation of prominence.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
As you have probably noticed, prominence in oblique orientation is allocated in content words. Since there is no apprehension of a context of interaction to guide the decisions of the speakers, prominence is assigned in a more or less automatic way to the open class words. There is a neutral distribution that presupposes engagement with nothing more than the language system, that is, according to Brazil, a condition that we have associated with oblique orientation. We have already talked about this teaching technique. Let's see what happens in this case.
Batman. Another thing that I really like about James Bond movies is that people do things like they'll use a shoe for a telephone, or you'll see cars flying through the air. And these are called special effects. Special effects. Good.
The 3.0 times 10 to the 8th.
In the first example, the teacher uses the level tone in order to elicit information from the students. So the idea is left incomplete for the students to complete it. In the second case, Brazil says this is also a typical use of oblique orientation in class, in which oblique orientation serves to mark off a piece of received wisdom, such as a formula. We mentioned before that people also shift to oblique orientation when they're having problems planning their speech. Let's see this example together.
Hello.
Who are you, my love?
I'm Gruffydd Wyn Roberts. I'm Welsh.
Yeah.
I'm 22 and I live in a small island called Anglesey in North Wales with my nan.
Oh, fantastic.
What's your granny's name?
My nan's called Alwena.
That's a great name. Alwena. And why don't you live with your mum and dad?
Well, I don't. I live with my nan because I haven't known my father till I was 16. Yeah, this is quite hard, sorry. Yeah.
Go on, Griff. Go on, Griff! Go on, Griff!
Are you going to sing?
Yeah, I'm going to sing for you today, yeah.
And what's the dream?
Just selling out theatres like this, hopefully.
All right, well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
This is a very clear example of verbal planning in which this young man finds it difficult to decide what to say, since to answer he needs to share quite private information. Okay, so what we have seen is that the existence of pre-coded or partially coded formulas and situations is a condition that favors a set towards the linguistic organization of the utterance rather than towards the hearer. Another condition might be the fact that encoding has not been achieved and presents some difficulties for the speakers. Brazil says that there's a tendency for pauses to follow instances of level tones, and there are also pause fillers and non-selective items that serve as carriers of tones. So what we have seen is a distinction between language as sample, which is oblique orientation, and language as a situated communicative event, which is what Brazil calls direct orientation. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.